It's great to be back in Denton. A couple of observations since I've been here. It's been about 5 years. Is that better? I'm still not where I need to be. Hello? Observations. That's better, I think. So things change, you know they do. But you guys were not lying about I-35. Oh my gosh. I had seen it on Facebook. I'd heard people complain. But last night when I'm driving in between the concrete barrier and the semi-truck, I was like, what am I doing? The second observation is I forgot how dang cold it gets here. I grew up in the Texas Panhandle where it definitely gets cold and swore I would live anywhere in Texas except Houston. I haven't completely acclimated to the Houston heat, but now I remember being here, how cold it is. And the third observation is I may or may not be aware now that there's a Sonic out at WinStar. Maybe I know that. Maybe somebody just told me that. But it is a pleasure to be home again. I did live here 12 years, been 5 years at Lone Star College, and I'm happy to be back and appreciate the opportunity to share some exciting work that we're doing at Lone Star Tomball. Some of you have heard most of this before. If you went to the TCCIL conference, whenever that was a few months ago, you'll hear a lot of the same. What's new this time is that we have our preliminary findings from the research we did last fall about the impact of grit on student success, and I'll begin to share some of that information with you. And you're actually the first group who's going to get to hear some of that preliminary results. So let's talk about grit and what it's got to do with it, and what's it? So we're going to cover 3 things, foundation, fundamentals, and future. So the foundation is the context in which this work began. And I'm going to try to argue that the completion agenda, as we've been working through it for the last several years, is incomplete. Then we'll move into the grit research that we did. What is grit? How did we define it? What does it look like? What was the research study? And then what were some of the results? And then based on that, what are we going to do next? Because we're just getting started. So we all start something new. It's what, January 22nd? How many of you still are on your resolutions from 21 days ago? All right, still working on those. So we all start something new. Everybody in here. And we probably woke up today saying, man, I'm going to start that diet again. And then there's eggs and cheese and biscuits and gravy, and you go, well, maybe tomorrow. So we all do that. And we start things for various reasons. We want to see a change. We want to make more money. We're just curious. My favorite picture up there is the kitten looking in the mirror and seeing the lion. We have a different image of what we want our future to be, so we start things for a lot of different reasons. And so do our students. But we also do things for maybe not the right reasons. My therapist told me the best way to achieve true inner peace is to finish what I start. So far, I finished 2 bags of M&Ms and a chocolate cake. Right? And thank you. That deserves a round of applause. True inner peace. But we also, probably everybody in here, have started things we haven't finished. And there are multiple reasons for that. We either may lose interest, it's too hard, it's not what we thought it was going to be, it's too expensive, it sure looked better on TV, and we get it like, wow, this isn't what it looked like it would be. Or we just have to balance that difference between being done and being perfect. And if it's never done, it's never perfect. We're able to not say it's not perfect. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't finish what we start. But why does it matter? I mean, does it really matter if you postpone finishing that book one more day or that exercise program one more day? And it really doesn't, unless what you're not finishing creates chaos in your life or creates a negative consequence such as student loan debt or some other impact that really is going to change your trajectory for the future. So it really, some things don't matter if you don't finish it. but some things really do. And our students aren't finishing what they start. And for the last several years, if you've worked in community colleges for the last several years, the completion agenda is all we've talked about. And that's a good thing. The completion agenda has moved us from, as was just said, from just focusing on access to also looking at success. So we've got to live within that context, and that's a good context. All of that kicked off about 2009. There's a lot of text up here, I don't expect you to see that. But when President Obama said and pointed out that the U.S. lagged behind in degree completion, and that it was one of his goals, objectives, to bring us back to the forefront, and then wanted us to be the leader again in degree completion. And that was the American Graduation Initiative, and he said by 2020, we will once again have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world, help to seek additional 5 million Americans. And that launched this incredible completion agenda from AACC, ACCT, NISOD, League of Innovation. Everybody got on board. Colleges got on board. When I went to Lone Star, they were a recipient of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant on completion by design. It was thrown right in the middle of that. Got to work with Texas Completes. So I've been involved at a very practical level with the completion agenda for several years. And a lot of us have. We're familiar with the coordinating board's new strategic plan, 60 by 30, more graduates, 60% of Texans aged 25 to 34 will have a degree or certificate. Many of you were at the Texas Completes Conference hosted in the Woodlands not too long ago. And if you Google Texas Completes or completion agenda, just about every college has some logo, some plan, some motto, something related to completion. So we're not going to spend time on the data on that because I'm going to assume that we all are familiar with it. And the completion agenda is good. Too much of a good thing can be wonderful, Mae West says. So what the completion agenda has done for us is moved us to a place we needed to go. So I'm not against the completion agenda, I just think we've missed the point. AACC, I don't know if you get these updates, Federal Policy Update, January 15th. A lot of text, and I want to point out something here. I'm just going to read it. Based on the data, so we've been doing completion work since 2009. And this latest result from 13 to 14, students attending public two-year institutions, the graduation rate was 21.8 in 2014, slightly higher than the 21.1. Okay, 21.8, 21.1, where's Keith Bailey? That's not very significant, right? Okay. Extending the period to completion depicts stronger student performance. For example, a graduation rate at 200% of the normal time at public two-year colleges is more than twice as high, moving from 11.3% to a whopping 26.7%. Is that good news? Hi, Cheryl. I just saw you. 26.7%. Is that enough? Is that something to be proud of? So we've had all of this work on the completion agenda, but we're only impacting the needle. We're just moving it just a little bit. So I've started grappling with, is this completion agenda complete? What are we missing? Something, it's not all together there yet. And I propose that all we've done so far is work on the policies and the processes. And that's been my experience. Your college may have already figured this out and are doing wonderful things. But my experience with the completion by design work Texas Completes and at Lone Star has been policy and process focused. So what have we done? We've automated processes. That graduation application, just let me fill that out for you. University, send me your credits and we'll reverse transfer that degree. Let me automate that for you. It's one approach, and that's not bad, but it's just an approach. We've mandated. How many of you have mandatory orientation now? Not bad. It's okay. How many of you have mandatory student success course? Most likely EDUC 1300. mandated for first-time in college students, right? Okay. And now, the restriction of choice also is not bad, but we're calling it pathways. Well, if we can limit the number of choices, they'll be on their pathway, they'll finish faster. Not bad. None of this is bad work. It has mattered and it was important to do, but I still think we're missing something. And I think what we're missing is who are we making this about? Because what if we did it perfectly? What if orientation gave every piece of information a student would ever need to finish in 2 years? And what if every policy, every process, financial aid worked perfectly every time? That'll never happen. Just saying. But what if? What if we did it exactly right? Would we be impacting completion for the right reasons? I think what we've done is make the completion agenda about our own success and not as much about the student's success. We say this is about student success, and I think in our hearts, those of us who have dedicated our lives to this work really, really want our students to be successful. I'm not saying that we don't. But we also want to be able to tout, well, my graduation rates increased 42% from 2013. What's yours? So subliminally almost, it's really about how we're doing as a college and not so much what our students are benefiting from the educational process. Pretty harsh statement. So we've faulted to things like this. Students don't do optional. And with great respect to Kay McClinney and Byron McClinney, who were the ones that really coined this work, how many of you have said this? Be honest, I did it. Well, students don't do optional, so we're just going to have to mandate it. There's some truth to that. And when, it's almost like with your children, brush your teeth. It's not optional. When you have a 12-year-old boy, you really know, please go brush your teeth. You stink, please go. So there's some truth to that. But there's a logical breakdown in that thought as well. And here's what I mean by that, is if students don't do optional, why are they enrolled? They don't have to be. Higher education, compulsory education in Texas ends 12th grade. They made a choice once. For whatever, even if the choice was based on the wrong reasons, they made a choice once, and they're with us. So let's not dismiss that, and let's not say they won't, because they did. So how do we capture that and work it into the work on what we're doing with completion? So the questions that we've been grappling with the last couple years at Tomball is how do we expand the completion agenda to meet the 21st century students' needs? And here's a reframe that's guiding that question for us. Can't take credit for it, but it changed. It was one of those things I heard and I just went, wow, that just changed my whole paradigm. For years we've talked about, those of us who have been doing this a long time, students being college ready. They're not college ready. They're coming to us, we're having to start all over. College ready, college ready, college ready, college ready. The question I would ask is what are we doing to be student ready colleges? And that's a different question. That doesn't mean lower standards, reduced rigor, any of that. But are we recognizing where our students are coming from, what they bring, what their challenges are? Are we ready for them? Now, I go to parent information nights and open house at my kids' school. And in fourth grade, first grade, second grade, kindergarten, their learning environment is so much different than ours were. That's who's coming to us. Are we ready for that? So it's just a different way to ponder. Yes, we want students to be college ready, but they shouldn't carry that whole burden. We need to be student ready colleges and together then will make a difference. And then, should it even be called the completion agenda anymore? Because what does completion imply? You're done. And I think that really what we want our students to do is to be ready to be employable and to be successful in whatever path they take. And I don't think anybody ever intended for the completion agenda's terminology to imply that we didn't want them to be successful in the future. But I think we've reached a point in the work on the completion agenda that we are unintentionally still focused on our success by calling it the completion agenda. It's really the beginning. It's the launch. It's the start. So how have we worked through all of this? It's beyond graduation. It's not about finishing a degree or certificate. It's beyond that. So we're trying to think of what we're doing at our college from a bigger perspective. Because life is, and you can fill in the blanks, and I've got some suggestions, life is hard, man, right? It's unpredictable. It's expensive. And life is bigger than college completion. That's just a part of it. So how do we find that missing piece? How do we really make a difference in the areas that matter the most? And that's the work we've been doing the last couple of years. So instead of just focusing on the policy and the process, we've actually chosen to focus on our students, the people that we're trying to impact. So why do students not finish what they start? You ever see this guy, Donna, in your class? Yeah. No, never. Not your class. You're not the one to pick on. So I didn't, no implication on Donna. They're all, so why do they finish? The same reasons, right? It's too hard. It's too expensive. It's not a lot of interest. I thought this was a good idea, but it's not. I want it to be perfect. So our students don't finish what they start a lot for the same reasons that we don't. But the ones we also turn to are they're unprepared. And this poor woman, I know a lot of us in the room can relate, juggling, working full time, going to school, raising kids, doing everything that has to be done. But it's getting to be a little bit more, I don't want to say important, because all of those things are important, and dire, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, so I'll just quit looking for it and move on. Psychology Today, September 22nd, research on college students, a decrease in the ability to deal with normal challenges of daily living. We've already said life is hard, and life is unpredictable. So if research is beginning to show, and this research was focused on university work and students living in residence halls, accessing counseling support for stuff that we're like, dude, that's not that big a deal. Just deal with it. But they can't. They can't. So it's great that they're willing to reach out for help. But that scares me a little bit. And this article came out not too long, or I read it for the first time, not too long after the shooting in Oregon. And I don't know if the dots are connected or not. But if there's that challenge of dealing with just daily life, and they're not able to do that, traditional students who we're talking about, then it's going to act out in other ways. I don't have a slide on here, but there's also another article. Some of us on Facebook that are together saw it, the ways that in parenting we're not building resilience in our children. And I tell you as a mom, that's hard, because my kids have it really good. And it's that balance of how to teach them through that positive adversity. You don't want to destroy their world, but they have got to learn how to do the daily stuff and to cope and to problem solve. And we're, as a society, moving towards we have a generation now who can't do that. So let's think bigger. Let's think about levels of interaction. And I think there's 4. You can ignore somebody, do to somebody, do for somebody, or do with somebody. And these are on increasing levels of positive impact. So ignoring somebody obviously is going to have the least impact. but doing with somebody has the most positive impact. So the completion agenda moved us out of ignoring the issue. But what we've done by the mandates, the automations, and the restriction of choice is done 2 and 4 students. So what's going to happen when they walk into, let me think of somebody we're working with in Houston, Freeport-McMoran Drilling, and wanting to go work in the oil and gas industry, but everything's been automated, mandated, told how to do it, they are going to get booted out the door so quickly. So that's why I think we've got to think of this more as from employability, not just finishing a degree or certificate. So we want to move towards doing with somebody in this level of interaction. So let me transition to kind of how we got into this work. And I'll be very honest, it was an accident. It all started because of something I wanted to do, a goal I had set 2 years ago. I set a resolution, said I'm going to read 12 books this year. And I listed them, printed them out, hung them on the fridge. No reason, I mean, there's the books. And this is what I started with. And I started, these are the influencers of this work. Paul Tuff, Carol Dweck, Angela Duckworth, and Paul Stoltz. And I'll talk about each of them in just a second. But Paul Tuff was the first one I read. And I read it as a mom. Well, How Children Succeed Through Grit, Curiosity, Hidden Power of Character sounds like a good book. So I picked it up with no intention of making this anything about work or my career. I picked it up with Rachel and Michael in mind. And it was this book that was the first to introduce the concept of grit. So for those of us who grew up in Amarillo and Lubbock, that's not how your teeth feel after a storm, windstorm. Just saying. And this book led me to, well, he had 7 predictors of life satisfaction, grit listed number 1. I was like, well, that's interesting. What is that? That took me to Angela Duckworth. And if you haven't seen her TED Talk, it's 11 minutes or so, watch it. And she is the one who really kind of put words first to this idea of what is grit. And here's how she defines it. It's self-discipline wedded to a dedicated pursuit of a goal, highly predictive of success. All of her work is research-based, from National Spelling Bees to West Point to inner city Chicago. And it's only faintly related to IQ. So her work is the first to say, it really doesn't matter how smart you are. If you've got this concept of grit as embedded, you have a greater likelihood of succeeding than someone who has a very high IQ but no grit. Okay, so think about our students. That's when I started going, wow, there's something here. There's something important about community colleges and this work. So then that work took me to Carol Dweck's work on mindset. And hers is more about, not as much about grit, even though you hear Duckworth and Dweck combined a lot. Hers is on mindset, all again very much research-based. And she identifies the difference between fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is when we look at, someone with a fixed mindset looks at challenges as bad, that skills and abilities are innate. You're born smart. You're born capable. You give up easily. Effort should be unnecessary because you're so smart. Why is this hard? Something's wrong. It's effort indicates you're not good enough. Feedback is taken personally. Okay, faculty in the room. Kristen, feedback on a paper. Well, what's wrong with you? Mom has always said that I wrote beautifully. You've never heard that, right? Never. So in this fixed mindset, that feedback is seen as bad. As an administrator, we get calls, well, I don't know what's wrong with that faculty member because, I've just always done so well in school. What is wrong with you? That happens. right? We've all gotten those phone calls. I'm like, oh my gosh, fixed mindset. And they get easily discouraged. Let's compare that to a growth mindset where someone with a growth mindset, and you can switch from fixed to growth. You can change from fixed to growth mindset. Skills and abilities come from hard work. You can always improve. Challenges should be embraced. They provide an opportunity to learn and build resilience that we're missing. So it's hard to talk about grit and resilience without talking about growth mindset. They just really fit together. Effort is a path to mastery. Feedback is useful. Setbacks are a wake-up call. So I'll ask you this question. When we do to and for somebody, which mindset are we perpetuating? The fixed. Because let me do it for you. Because you can't. Parents, when we do our children's homework, what are we saying? Okay, so side story. I have never done my son's homework. I'll confess that. But there is a balance. So as a very, very busy mom, my guilt is, oh man, Michael, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had that award ceremony today. Or, geez, I am so sorry, I didn't realize that was happening. How'd you do on your test? So he came home the other day and said, Mom, today was the day we picked our electives for 7th grade. And I just went, oh no. I said, I had no idea. I said, so what'd you pick? Athletics, which is good. He's in football. He's 5'6", 220, so that's good. And he's 12. And band. No offense about band, but the child has never picked up an instrument in his life. And I was like, are you kidding? Okay, let's see how this goes. Well, there's that dissonance for me because I wanted to nurture and guide that selection process, and I never would have picked band. I was a choir queen, so, I would have never picked band. No offense to the band people in the room. But then I had to wrestle with that in my head and go, this is okay. Because he chose that. He felt confident enough to make a decision. He made a choice. He made a selection. If it doesn't work, then it's perpetuating growth mindset. Well, that didn't work. And it may work great. I don't want to shortchange that for him. So when we do to, for, and not with, I think the completion agenda is inadvertently perpetuating that fixed mindset in our students. So let's talk about Tomball just a little bit. So Lone Star College, many of you have probably heard of or familiar with. Some used to work there, Bill. By the way, I'm kicking Bill's butt in Words with Friends. And I'm only saying that because I never win. So I am very proud that I think I'm like 300 and something and you're like 2 something. Okay. So Lone Star College, based in Houston, 90,000 students, 6 colleges. My college, I think, is the best because we have the best of everything. We're a smaller college. We're the smallest in our system. And in Tomball, we retain the idea of the small town feel, but we've got the benefit of the huge metropolitan area around us. So it's just the perfect place for me. Great fit. Our distinction is that we have, as the 3rd oldest college in the system, we have launched 2 of our sister colleges. Sci-Fair first, and then most recently University Park. And University Park now is growing at 30%. They have over 11,000 students, and I'm right at 9,000 students. So if you look at Tomball's enrollment history, you're like, what the world is, it's crazy, because it's up, 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 down. Took 7 years to build up, down. And so our distinction is having launched those 2 and being the most rural campus in our service area. So we were in an enrollment management workshop the other day, and our team from system office was giving us data on, you're going to have to enroll 9,000 students, you're going to have to touch 34,000 people. Raise my hand. I said, okay, there's not 34,000 people in my service area. Can we enroll cows and horses? Because there is no way that's going to work. So since becoming president, our focus has been not on recruitment, but on retention. And many of you are in the same situation. If we could just retain the students that we have, then our enrollment challenges would be solved. And retention's what it should be about anyway, when we think about who is this about. So retention has been our driving KPI. That's what we're really trying to do. The other distinction we have is when you compare our enrollment to our sister colleges, the average course load at all the other colleges is 3.2. And at Tomball, it's 1.9. So we've been trying to figure out why are our students taking fewer classes? And if we could fix that, then we would also solve our enrollment problem. And the enrollment problem is only a problem because it's how our budget works. So if you're not, just like the state, if you don't grow, you don't get money. And 87% of our budget, we've got about a $22 million budget at Tomball, is tied up in salaries. And so we just are kind of in this quandary here. So we're looking at retention. How can we improve that? All under the umbrella of really making a difference for the students. So I mentioned that 2 years ago this work started with me reading Paul Tuff's book and then Carol Dweck's book. I still have 10 books I haven't read from 2014. I didn't finish that because I just got so excited and so involved in this work that the other stuff didn't seem to matter anymore. So we did a TED Talk. We had a TEDx Tomball in last April 2014, and I tried to articulate then what I'm articulating now. And it was clumsy. I didn't quite have it all figured out. Still don't have it all figured out, but I'm much further down the road. So don't watch that, is my point, okay? Don't go there. So starting in the spring of 2014, we just kind of launched this idea. What about grit? What about growth mindset? We have a faculty and staff research council, and they picked it up and ran with it. A common read of Carol Dweck's work. Everybody watched Duckworth. I did a Grit 101, professional development. And the faculty, we just kind of got a critical mass of faculty who were interested in looking at the work. And all I did was just kind of lob it. Then partnered with Phi Theta Kappa, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But we did the article recently, or not too recently, in TCCTA's journal. And then the response to all of this work has been, I never would have dreamed or imagined the opportunities to speak about this. And so those are just some places where we were sharing the message. But I knew we were onto something because the response has been so overwhelming. And people have been so responsive and so interested in the work. But the magic really started when we partnered with Phi Theta Kappa. So everybody, you all have Phi Theta Kappa chapters, right? So as you know, their project is supposed to partner with the administration. What do we want to do to impact the campus? And I met with the officers and I said, we're really looking at this grit stuff. And they said, that sounds awesome. We're going to do it too. And that student group, I can't even hardly tell you how impressed I was with the work that they did. Everything was grit. They did the research. It was amazing. One of the things that they did, the picture up kind of in the left, find a way or make one, is the officers, and that's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if I count right, went into every EDUC 1300 section and told their grit story. And so here's Phi Theta Kappa, where the Honor Society, academic excellence, hearing students say, I had to take developmental math 5 times, and now I'm in PTK. I couldn't speak English 2 years ago, and now I'm an officer in PTK. And having that student-to-student connection was just powerful. And I can't emphasize enough how important and what a difference that made in our work. And I'm convinced, I'm going to brag, warning, that it was that work that set our chapter apart. And at the last Phi Theta Kappa convention, our little chapter of just a few students won the most distinguished chapter award out of all the PTK chapters internationally, 1,300 of them. Thank you. Another indication this work matters, that there's something here that's going to move us forward. So I'm real proud of them. And they're taking that forward now. They've taken Grit now out into the community and are working with, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Boys and Girls Country is an organization there in Tomball. And they're taking their Grit stories to these kids who don't have families, who've been orphaned or in situations where they had to be removed from their families. So this year we launched Grit, Growth, and Greatness, G3, and we're trying to take the Grit work to the next step. When we started it, we had a year's worth of exploration and kind of playing around with it. Phi Theta Kappa did an awesome job, and now this year we've partnered with Paul Stoltz. He was the other picture I said, was an influencer. And the reason, how we got connected with Paul Stoltz was interesting. Did anybody go to the TCCTA conference where he spoke? I figured there'd be a few in here who heard him. And he's written the book on Grit, but his earlier books are The Adversity Quotient. You might be familiar with that. This book is fairly recent. But he's got about 30 years of research behind him on the impact of resilience and grit in the corporate world. But he wanted to see how to infuse grit in higher ed. Well, he spoke at TCCTA, and our Phi Theta Kappa advisor was there. And she's got a lot of grit. And she stopped him and made him talk to her, and he was about to be late for a flight. And she said, "We've got to tell you what we're doing." And he listened, and he said, "Let's talk some more." So last summer, we had a phone conversation with him, and he's in partnership with Pearson, and here we go. His definition of grit, though, really stood out to me, because all through this work, there was still something in the back of my mind that was like, grit's it, but it's more than grit. There's something still not quite right that was just intuitive. His definition of grit is your capacity to dig deep to whatever it takes, sacrifice, struggle, suffer, to achieve your most worthy goals. And so what does that mean? Dr. Stoltz's work has taken grit from an idea of quantity of grit, just have a whole lot, to the quality of grit. And that was the difference. And why that bugged me before we just, and Duckworth's definition's fine and great, and that work matters. But I kept thinking, there's got to be, how do you tell the guy who has taken developmental math 15 times, just have some more grit? No, that doesn't work. That's where it broke down for me. I was like, there's got to be something different. And I also was influenced and had the question in my mind, because when my daughter Rachel was born, the idea went away that you can just tell people, put your mind to it, and you can be anything you want to be. I quit believing that when my daughter was born. And the reason I quit believing that is she has Down syndrome. And I can't tell her, Rachel, just put your mind to it, you be a doctor. No, I can't say that to her. Well, okay, so she's got a genetic issue. Can you say it to your son, Michael? Well, no, not really. Because it's a whole lot more than just putting your mind to it. But you gotta work, dude. You gotta struggle. You gotta have some adversity. It's not just putting your mind to it. And I believe now that people will reach their capacity, whatever that might be. But people's capacities are different. But who am I to say what that capacity is? Rachel can exceed, she always does, the capacity that you just don't know. What can she do? What can she not do? But so does Michael. He picked band. Not sure what to do about that. No offense. So, quality over quantity was what Dr. Stoltz's work did. It shifted to a more meaningful definition of grit, not just have a whole lot of it. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So he gets into bad grit, good grit, dumb grit, smart grit, weak and strong, all under the umbrella of robustness. Your ability to hold in there is the wear and tear factor over time. So just quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these definitions because I want to get to the research piece. Bad grit versus good grit. How many of you have worked with somebody who gets it done no matter what? And they'll run over anybody to do it. Yeah? I'm not the only one? Okay. That's bad grit. So differentiating between bad grit and good grit. Dumb grit and smart grit. It may not be real smart to keep hitting your head against that wall that just isn't going to move. And sometimes stopping something and going a different direction is an act of grit. And so that's what he begins to differentiate. He has a grit gauge, and it's been, the reliability, validity is the most advanced, scientifically grounded, widely adopted assessment of grit. So grit stands for growth, resilience, instinct, and tenacity. And there's a scale for each one of those. And then again, the robustness scale. And all validated and reliable. Preliminary, before we partnered with him, he was finding, just through some preliminary easy research, that it was impacting goal completion, goal likelihood, and the magnitude of the goal. And so this is why he wanted to do deeper research on this topic. And we partnered. Last August, he came to Lone Star College-Tomball and joined us for 2 days of professional development. And prior to that, we designed a research study with Pearson, ETS, and Peak Learning, which is Paul, to implement a study at Tomball this past fall. So we incorporated Phi Theta Kappa again, so they were participants in the professional development and the work. And then all of our faculty and staff, we went through a full day on what is good grit, bad grit, smart grit, what does that look like, how does the grit gauge work? And it's groundbreaking. We're the first college that he's partnered with on this depth of research, and so it's fun to be able to say that we're on this cutting edge of this research. So our goals in looking at this, we wanted it to be a minimum burden to faculty and students, but have maximum statistical rigor. We wanted it to be compelling, epic, and efficacious. We wanted it to impact the right stuff. So those were kind of the guiding principles for the design. Now, as I said, we're partnered with Peak, which is Paul Pearson. ETS is the statistical party looking at all of the data. And then Acclaim awards badges, so we've issued grit badges to our students. So it's a multi-leveled partnership. So the questions we were answering is, does it predict our performance indicators, including student performance, course completion, course load, etc.? And intuitively we know, we think it will, but we need to validate it through the research. And to what extent does grit grow and improve over the duration of one academic term? And does what role does feedback play in this in the classroom? And then what, if any, difference does the degree to which a faculty member emphasizes grit make a difference? And repeated exposure, what difference does that make? So the design with IRB approval is we did randomized sampling. And all of our full-time faculty were either in a with grit group or a no new grit group. And some of the feedback that we got was, but we already do this. Like, I know, but let's study this. And let's see if this really does, and if it's on purpose, can it influence completion? And so we did the randomized sampling, and the only negative feedback I got was, okay, so you just put me through 2 days of professional development, you just got me really excited about all of this, and now I can't talk about it? So if that was the only negative feedback we got, I felt pretty good about it. All EDUC 1300 faculty participated, even the adjuncts, and then we invited all of our students to take that grit gauge for free. And that was personal emails from me to 9,000 students. We had almost 2,000 students take it, so we've got a pretty good response rate there. And it was, again, as I said, it was free. But we wanted them to take it at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester, too. And we had, from the ones that took it at the beginning, about 24% took it the second time. So we're still trying to increase that. So the grit faculty, all they had to do was have the students complete the grit gauge, show a 15-minute grit video that was done by Dr. Stoltz at their own pace. It could be 15 minutes at the beginning, middle of the semester, broken up, however they wanted to do it. Had to gritify at least one assignment, so we didn't ask for any curriculum redesign or new assignment, but just take something that you already do and gritify it. And that's what the second day of professional development was how to do that. And then whatever they wanted to with grit, had free reign. The no new grit faculty also had the students take the grit gauge, but then just didn't do anything different. So that was our control. We did a grit, just gathered feedback from faculty about what they were doing with grit already, and then this is just a sample of what the students saw when they logged in. Some of our faculty, I know you can't read that, but just like everywhere, there's about 20% who just grab it and run. And this is, we've had some of that. Some amazing work has come out to the point, this was developed by LaToya Lewis, who teaches in the AAT program now. She started off in developmental reading. Pearson is working with her. They want to publish her work on what she did with grit. And so there were just some that just really embraced it. So here's what we're finding so far. Sean Martin, who's a professor at the Carroll School of Management at Boston College, gave us these statistics. He's Dr. Stoltz's psychometrician. Pearson is using ETS to validate the data, so we're going to have it looked at by two independent parties. Everything I'm telling you today, I have to put a big caveat on it, that it's only preliminary. And so until ETS finishes their work, and we just finished this in December, so until ETS finishes their work, I have to say this is all preliminary, but this is what we're finding. So overall, grit significantly is related to GPA, cumulative GPA, and credits earned, significantly related to grades earned in specific classes, and classes that incorporated grit to the curriculum saw a higher number of successful completions. So in short, the grit classes had a 3% higher completion rate than the no grit classes. And 3% may not sound like a whole lot, but it's a start, and it's significant. And so there's so much more data that needs to be looked at, but preliminarily it's very, very strong. Also, students, having grit relates to accumulating more credits and having a better GPA, and across classes and teachers. So it doesn't matter what class, which teacher, students with higher grit get better grades. Well, that makes sense. I mean, if they already have higher grit, you would think that they'd be more resilient and able to have higher grades. But the data, the research now that's not been done to show that is affirming that. And teachers who incorporate grit have more students pass their class. And so, again, preliminarily, it's pretty compelling that grit really does make a difference. Now, I also want to acknowledge, and I told our own faculty this, I know you guys want students to be resilient. I know you want that. You're already working towards that. All that we're trying to do now is acknowledge how critical it is that the faculty do that. That you guys, the faculty, are the ones that are doing this on the front line, in the classroom, where it really matters. And so the teacher involvement's just critical. There's the 3% difference in successful completions. And then the grit badge I mentioned that Acclaim has awarded. Now, that was if you took the grit gauge once. If you take it a second time, then there's an advanced grit badge. And these are the kind of things, this was new to me, that you can put on your LinkedIn profile or other things that you can take into the work world and say, I'm grit certified. So it should help, I guess. So what does grit got to do with it? So what is it? So it's completion agenda, it's their world, their success, their own lives. And so I think it's really the it is everything. And then what's next for us is we're going to enhance, expand, and examine. So we're continuing to look at the data from 2015. We are now providing, well, not now, again, providing the Grit Gauge access to all 9,000 students for free. All faculty are going to be with Grit, so we're getting away from just the research phase and opening it up to everybody. And then the next phase, how many of you are familiar with David Conley's work? So he's the Conley Readiness Index. He and Paul Stoltz have now partnered, and the College Readiness Index, some of those questions are embedded in the Grit Gauge. And we're going to use our EDUC 1300 class to pilot that for the first time ever. So what if you begin to see the power of what are they bringing with us? How gritty are they? Are they ready? We're looking at the people. And then we'll further validate the data. We're also doing things like our Model UN program is award-winning. They do great work. And they're going to do a video story over the course of their preparation and development for the work at Model UN in New York this spring. And then Pearson's going to partner with us on that and make that public and available. Okay, so let me wrap it up. I'm running out of time. As open enrollment institutions at community colleges, we know that students come to us with lots of different capacities. And I want to acknowledge that we have already some of the grittiest students you'll ever meet. And we see them every day. It's the single mom working full-time, raising 2 kids, and has a 4.0. She's going to be great. She's got grit. She's already does. Then we have the student who may have never had a positive academic experience in their whole life. And they're coming to us with a fixed mindset. And that first hurdle, they say, see, told you, this wasn't for me. And they leave. Well, no policy or process is going to change that. So we've got to acknowledge that piece. And then we've got this kid who expects everything to be a trophy. These are the guys where the lack of resilience. They don't know how to cope. They can't deal with the daily adversities of life. So here's what I want to do as I proceed in this work. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm not going to have all my students 100% finish. But if I can impact them while they're with us, even if that's for a semester, I want to do that. And I want them to know how to finish, whatever they start. I want them to want to finish because it's their choice to do it, and I can't make them finish. I want them to know how to push through when it's boring, confusing, teacher's not engaging, it happens, 3 papers due on the same day, it happens. In other words, I want them to just be able to deal with the daily realities of college. And I want to be honest with them. At Lone Star, I know we've got, is this being recorded? Hello? At Lone Star, our marketing is amazing. And a lot of colleges will have very similar slogans. Come here, start anywhere, go anywhere. Show up, your future's bright. Walk through the red door, your future's limitless. And I think intentionally we leave out the part that it's going to take a whole lot of work in between. Because just show up. I'm just going to show up. And then you may not have to work. Yeah. So I want to be real honest with them. That there is work to be done and things to be learned. And I don't want a college degree to be a participation trophy. I don't want them to just show up and because we've automated and mandated and told them everything to do along the way, congratulations, you get a degree. I don't want us to minimize the importance of that. And I want them to have grit in all the right ways. And I want to end on this. Some of you may be familiar with Simon Sinek's work. So I've talked about all of this, but why? Why does this matter? So I like to close the presentation with a short video that tells you my why. Because we all have a story, everybody in the room, and our students do too. And we need to know that. So let's watch this quick video in closing, and this will give you my why. Hopefully this will work. I always hold my breath at this point. Thank you, Christine. that was filmed a year ago. My mom was the one who's been married 5 times. So thank you for listening to me tell this story again. I think the story's just beginning. I think we've got a lot of exciting work ahead of us to do, and I'm happy. I think we've got this next session afterwards to answer any questions. So
we have 10 minutes now for a few general session questions, but then if you want to have an in-depth discussion with her, you're going to stay in this room from 10:30 to 11:20, and she can talk more about it. But right now, for the benefit of everyone, if you've got any questions, we'd like to take them. Oh, come on, you've got questions. I'll ask if you don't have one. Okay.
How much does that grid test cost for that, you gave for free?
I don't even know. We didn't even talk about the cost. So I'm sure at some point Pearson's going to want us to start paying for that. But right now, it's just through this partnership. They're so intent on wanting to make this a national resource that we're just no cost to us right now. We did pay a small stipend for Dr. Stoltz to come out and participate in the partnership, but it was really relatively nominal. So right now we've been able to do this at very, very low cost. They're all running to you.
Hi, Jonathan Perez, Tarrant County College. I'd like to say thank you for the video that you showed. I think a lot of times in education, we're always focused on the policy, the numbers, and everything else that comes with that. Seeing stuff like that is very refreshing.
Thank you.
At my campus, I usually talk to our students and I tell them that at TCC, we're not just in the business of education, but in the business of changing lives. I was one of the students that it changed my life as well. So I just want to say thank you for that. It was a great video. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing that all over the country one day.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you.
I just wanted to see.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
I don't have my glasses on, but I recognize you.
I'm Matt Taylor, also with TCC Northeast Campus, and I wondered, I know this is pretty new and fresh for you, but in terms of, I agree with you in terms of your approach that, and I echo this all the time at my campus, that we're not there necessarily for us, we're there for the student, and that we, just because we hit our benchmarks and our goals doesn't mean that our students are being successful. And so, and I'm with you in terms of, degree completion doesn't necessarily equate to success for a student. They may just be there to complete a class or to get a specific skill set. And so what I'm wondering is dollars don't typically follow that mindset. And so specifically from you as a president, how do you reconcile the fact that it's so difficult to get support, period, let alone for a mindset that doesn't show hard statistical
That's a great question.
Completion.
So the question being, so this is great, we need to do this, but how did the dollars, and how do you get support for that? This, again, not to undo at all that this is really about the students, and I have such a heart for it being about the students. When we, at least at Lone Star, impact retention, though, that's going to impact contact hours, which is going to impact funding. So in kind of a round way, that will come. That in fact, I can't chalk it up to this completely, but every day at Tomball, we have dashboards, our enrollment, and are we reaching our targets, and oh my goodness. For the first time in almost 2 years, our headcount enrollment is up 5%. Now, I can't say that the 5% is because a direct relationship to this, but it's pretty compelling that there's some relationship there. And so it is, and that's above. We also opened a new center in January, our Creekside Center. We've got 340 students enrolled there. So that 5% is above the Creekside enrollment. So I'm hopeful, as we dig deeper into it, that we really are going to see retention and enrollment growth because of the work, and it's a win for everybody. the students and the college. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Hello.
Tom Chesney from Brookhaven in Dallas. So question, multi-college system, very large. In your vision, in your system's vision as well, 40% of our students take courses at more than one campus.
Right.
So that student experience for a Tomball student could become different from some other in the system. Is your vision for it that this could become something you bring to scale for all students, regardless of where they are within the Lone Star?
Thank you for asking that question. So this very much has been a Tomball thing this year, and in fact, we'll go to a meeting, we'll be at a completion meeting, enrollment management meeting, or whatever, and I'll raise my hand, and people will groan because they know what I'm going to talk about. She goes with grit again. So it's kind of, but yes, the vision very much is to expand now. One of the things I didn't mention is when Dr. Stoltz came for our August professional development, we also had our school district superintendents and counselors in the room. And so they're very aware of this work, and I'm giving this presentation on 2 weeks at Tomball ISD leadership team meeting because that vision within Tomball is for the school districts that we serve to also be doing this work, and so students are learning this from day one through us. So there's expansion that way. Sometimes you're, I'm going to mess it up. It's a biblical. You're not a prophet in your own land. What is that? Whatever that, Brent, I'm looking at you because you started nodding, so you knew exactly what I meant. So there's a bit of, Tomball's doing the grit stuff. But very interesting, I got an invitation this week for University Park to, what are y'all doing? And can you come talk to us about this? And our chancellor is very aware of the work, and I'm feeding him all of the results and the data and all, and so people are very aware. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think within the next, after we get through this year and have all of our data very well vetted and statistically sound, then roll that out, then I think as a system we'll see it grow. But we're not there yet. We are not there yet.
Okay, I have a question. Christine.
Oh, I was like, where did that come from? Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about the results of the grit gauge in terms of what the student takes at the beginning of the semester? What feedback do they get? What are they expected to do with that throughout the semester? And how is it communicated to faculty? Is it student by student? Do they get a profile for their class? And how does that inform their work?
Great question. So part of the study was when the students took the grit gauge, and I took it. All the faculty and staff were able to take it as well. And so you get a score for growth, resilience, instinct, and tenacity, and robustness, and then that forms your overall grit score. And it surprised me that my grit score was lower in instinct, which is knowing the right things to be gritty about. Because I just want to be gritty on everything. So that was the feedback I got. But you get a feedback report immediately that gives you an analysis of all of those 4 scales and then the robustness scale. So it gives you feedback on areas where you can work on to improve your grit. Faculty had the choice of, some said in the With Grit group, bring me your printout, let's talk about it. Some said, just prove to me that you took it and I'll give you extra credit. And some said, you can show me or not. They all had that freedom within their course on how to do it. Now, obviously, because we grouped designed the study by faculty, students were going to be in either multiple with grit classes or a no grit class and a with grit class. And we tried to we grouped our students and our communications based on that. So there were different grit gauge links sent to those different groups of students. So we had students who only had grit classes, some who had no grit classes, and some who had both. And then we tried to analyze that on the back end. I don't think I answered your question, though. So how do they get feedback?
So I think you did. So the students are getting individual feedback,
Oh,
but the
I
faculty
remember.
members are not getting a profile of their
Unless they ask for it.
Right.
And so the other piece of the research design, though, and one of the questions, I know I went over that pretty quick, was when the student took the grit gauge, they were randomized on the back end, where some had additional feedback via video from Dr. Stoltz. And so they did their grit gauge, got their score, and then a video came up and said, hey, here's what your score is, this is what this means. Some did not. And so all they got was their grit gauge without that additional feedback. And what that was showing, some of the research on the preliminary, is the ones that got that additional feedback, scores improved more than the ones who didn't get any feedback on their gauge. So that's still preliminary, but we're looking at that.
Other questions?
Okay, I'm done.
All right.
Thank you very much.